In this video, we are going to talk about how to use the Athena to query the Cloudtrail logs, especially during the incident response time. There is a previous video which is about testing the ChatGPT and see how much help that we can get from it during this similar scenario. So there are some interesting findings. If you haven't watched that video, you can check this out. As we know, the incident response is a very critical time for the security analyst to try to get as much insight and information as possible and in a faster manner. So the more you know about using Athena and Cloudtrail and query those logs, the better position that you will be. So now let's look into how can we use this service. Just a quick recap for our test environment here. Now we're using a very common pattern, which is to have our Cloudtrail logs to store in the S3 bucket. And then once it's been stored, we can use the Amazon Athena, which is a managed service from AWS, which allows you to use the standard SQL query language to query those logs in S3 bucket. And compared with the previous logs, we are not using anything from ChatGPT. We purely use the security team's expertise to conduct those investigations using the standard SQL language. So imagine one day when you get back to work, you find there's a very strange S3 bucket created within your account. If you click into that bucket, there's also a very strange and actually scary name of the file that presented. And if you read into that file, it's actually a very ransom style of the file, which is shown here, that are telling you how much money that you have to pay. If you haven't paid, then your data, especially your critical customer data, might be presented in the dark web, etc., etc. So this is apparently a very serious security issues, and this is a simulated event that we try to look into. So now we have set up our Athena integration with Cloudtrail and S3 bucket. And we also created the relevant database and the tables, which has been shown here. Now we are good to go to use the SQL language to query those Cloudtrail logs. The first thing we want to see is that as we put together the first query language here, we want to find out any logs that's related to this put object event name, and also conducted or actually related to this file name, which is the strange file that we found in our bucket. So if we execute this query language, that should be coming up with some Cloudtrail logs, which we can see here. Right, so if we scroll to the right, identity. So actually the second column we shown here, the user identity, it actually tells us the identity information related to the conductor. So if we look into the username section, we can find this username. So this becomes our curious point. We try to find out more related to these users regarding all the activities that's being conducted by this user. So to do that, I would execute the other SQL query. So what I would do is I would type in select asterisk from, I will put in my table name here, which is stored in our default database, and where request parameters, like this is the parameter. I would copy the name here and see how would it give me. So we execute the queries and see what would come back. Normally it just take 1 or 2 seconds. Great. Now we can see around 18 routes that's been come back. And if we just scroll right, we can look into further details around this query result. The next thing I want to show you is that underneath the event name of the query result, we can find different activities that's being conducted by this IAM user. So this includes create a user, attach user policy, create the access key, etc., etc. And some of the actions actually would not be executed on a regular basis, such as delete the user, right? Or, of course, including the create a user. So this could be a very suspicious user that we need to look into further. But at the moment, we don't have further proof to validate this is actually the malicious IAM users. So we need to conduct a further investigation. So during the incident response process, we need to utilize all the information, including the information that might be exposed by the attacker. So if we go back to our file, and then we can actually find there's one file name, the credit-card-data.csv file, containing the credit card number, etc. This seems to be, the file that's been targeted by the attacker, right? So we try to find out more information around this potentially lost file. Let's go back to our Athena query, and if we change the query to here, basically we try to look into our Cloudtrail database and where request parameter like this, try to find out more related to this credit card number, right? More specifically, it is the file that might be lost. So now we have get some of the query result here, which is great, exactly what we need. And if we look into the first thing, event, let's say event, search event name, we can see basically these are the event or the activities that's being conducted by this specific user. And if we look into that, one of the event actually is a delete object. So it seems this object has been deleted by this user. And if we scroll to the left, let's see who actually conducted this attack. Underneath the user identity column, we can see, still remember the last row is the relevant record. So this one actually shows the username is this user. So we can jot this down. This can be the next entry point that we can try to search for further information. And the next one we want to find is request parameters. It's actually here. Just bear with me. And if we just scroll to the right, we can see, alright, so the credit card name, actually this file name has been appeared. So it does show this file was related to the deletion activity. And so with that, the next step is we try to look into more information related to this IAM user for all the potential activities that he has completed. So now let's use the Athena to query all the related Cloudtrail logs that's related to this IAM user, which we have shown here. Let's execute the query. Takes a couple seconds. So this basically we haven't used any filter. So literally all the related activities associated with this user should be shown here, and we will see a whole bunch of it, right? So it's basically 100 row of the result have been returned. So we need to just use some of the filter to narrow it down a little bit. To narrow down the search result a little bit, let's use some of the new filter as we shown here. Now we try to figure out the event name equals to the delete object as well as the get object. Let's run this. Pretty much we try to understand what other activities have been conducted by this IAM user. So now we have narrowed down the result from 100 to 23. And as usual, we would focus on the event name first. So these are the event name. Some are quite self-explanatory, like list object. And when it comes to something that might be interesting, let's look into that more further. So the head object, so what this means is this API call actually was used to delete the bucket. Actually was not. So it is used for retrieving the information about an object without retrieving the object itself. So this is about the head object. What about the get caller identity? The get caller identity actually was about to provide information to the caller about these credentials that are currently in use. And what about list bucket? Quite straightforward. Delete bucket, right? And attach user policy. Attach user policy, which is related to the IAM role, IAM user. and create access key. Still quite straightforward. And one thing actually is quite interesting is the delete user, and this one we actually will need to look into further. Now we want to query about the event time, so we can have more context around the sequencing of all the activities that's been happened. So if we do the query in this way, we will focus on the event time, event name, and request parameters. We would look at the user for this one, this user, and also we will filter out the delete object and get object event name. Let's run this query. So the whole idea is try to understand, because from incident response perspective, we need to understand the sequencing, so we can correlate that with some of the impact that happened before. So now we have the query result, right? We still have 23 routes here, and if we just sort the event time, we can actually do it here. Let's do a sequencing. So this is the oldest and this is the newest event. And interestingly, if we look into that, there is a very interesting event name, create user. And this user, this is a username that's being created. And if you can recall the previous section of the video, this user was actually used to create the bucket and then to store the malicious or the ransomware created the style of the file. And then put it in the S3 bucket. So this user, we can conceive that as the very potential attacker. So what it does is after this user have been created, there's action to attach the user policy. Interesting. Let's look into that. And if we scroll right, there's a administrator access permission that's been attached to this user. So from the attack lifecycle perspective, this IAM user have been escalated and with more privilege permission to conduct more harm to the environment. Now let's look at the next. So this user has been created the access key, right? And all the way down. After, so there's the following actions which was related to delete access key, detach user policy, all the way down to the delete the user, right? So we can conceive that this was actually done after the user have been used to create the bucket and then to store the file, and every attack that's been conducted after that has been completed, then the user have been deleted. Now let's look further around the peripheral information around this. Now let's use another query to look into the delete object action that conducted by the malicious user. So this is our new query. I will execute that. So in this new query, we would pretty much focus on the event time, event name, and also we would narrow it down to the event name, which is the delete bucket activity. And also we would pretty much looking at this malicious user. So now we have got one of the result coming back, and this is related to delete bucket apparently. And now from here I want to highlight the request parameters. Under it, we can actually answer the question for what is the bucket name that's been deleted by this user. So this is the bucket name. We can look into further in this bucket. Now let's look into more details around this S3 bucket. And if I just update the query into here. So now we execute the query. This query pretty much looking at the get object event name and focusing on this impacted bucket which has been deleted. So if we look down, there are around over 100 of the get object activity that's been conducted. And if we scroll right a little bit, we can see, hey, this is bucket name, host, and also the key that's been used for conducting this this activity. So pretty much this key was related to a Excel file. So these are the data. It tells us these are the data that have been breached and deleted by the malicious activity. So now this concludes the demo. So during the demo, we have showcased how can we find the entry point and then to build up the whole picture? Because during the incident response, it's always like finding the entry point, and then we start to dig deeper into it and connect the dots, and then to build a whole view of what's actually being conducted by the malicious user. So by using the Athena query, we started by using the file name that's been pointed out by the malicious user in the file stored in the S3 bucket. And then we start to look into all the Cloudtrail activities related to that file, and then we find out the potential malicious user and also validate that's the attacker and what are the relevant activities that's being conducted by this user, including list the bucket, get the object, and also delete the user, delete the bucket, etc. And we also confirm what is the bucket name that's actually being deleted and also the file associated with that. Apparently, this is just the starting point for the investigation, but it helps a lot for the security analyst to understand the actual scope of the attack and also understand much better for the business impact. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you find it helpful, please give it a like. Bye for now.